The millionaire's mother had always been a shadow of her former self. In the grand mansion that overlooked the city skyline, the halls echoed not with laughter, but with a silence so heavy it felt almost tangible. Every day, she grew worse, retreating deeper into herself, her once brilliant eyes now clouded with despair. Her hands, once steady and capable, now trembled as she clutched the arm of her worn-out chair, afraid to let go. Doctors had prescribed medications, therapists had offered words of encouragement, yet nothing seemed to reach the heart that ached silently behind her closed doors. Her son, Daniel, the millionaire who had everything the world could offer, wealth, influence, and admiration, found himself powerless in a way money could never fix. He had built empires, signed deals worth millions, and attended galas that dazzled the press. But when he walked through the doors of his own home, he was confronted with a life he could not buy his way out of. Watching his mother fade away felt like witnessing the slow erosion of something sacred, a pain so raw that it refused to be soothed with anything but love. Every morning, Daniel would enter the mansion, expecting to find her sitting in the sunlit corner of the living room, as she had for decades. But more often than not, he found her staring blankly at the wall, lost in memories too painful to share, or slipping into moments of confusion that left him trembling with frustration and sorrow. He had tried everything, moving her into the best facilities, hiring specialists, even attempting to care for her personally. But he was a man whose life ran on schedules, meetings, and decisions. He did not have the patience to sit quietly with someone who had lost the ability to communicate clearly. His mother's decline was a mirror of his own helplessness. Then came Rosa. Rosa was the new cleaning lady, hired not for her connections, her qualifications, or even her experience, but simply because Daniel had finally conceded that he could not do it all. She arrived one rainy morning, a small woman with a quiet presence, eyes that seemed to see more than they let on. She did not speak much, and when she did, her words carried a warmth that reminded people of home, the way sunlight spills through a window on a winter morning. The first time Rosa entered the mansion, she did not flinch at the silence. She did not attempt to fix it with chatter or cheerfulness that felt forced. Instead, she moved gently through the rooms, dusting, cleaning, and organizing with a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. But it wasn't just the house she tended to. She noticed the smallest details about its inhabitant. She noticed the way Mrs. Whitman's hands shook when she reached for her teacup, the way her lips trembled when she tried to form words, the subtle sigh that escaped her like a confession of unspoken pain. It began with small gestures. Rosa would leave a cup of tea exactly where Mrs. Whitman could reach it without strain. She would hum softly as she cleaned, a gentle lullaby that seemed to awaken fragments of memory. She would call her by name, even when Mrs. Whitman looked away, pretending not to hear. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the woman who had been fading into shadows began to respond. At first, it was just a blink, a fleeting acknowledgement that she existed in the moment. But those blinks grew into gazes, and those gazes grew into words. Daniel watched all of this with a mixture of skepticism and awe. How could a cleaning lady, someone whose job was considered mundane by society, achieve what countless professionals, medications, and therapies could not? Yet day after day, Rosa's presence brought a spark to the room that had long been extinguished. She listened, really listened, without judgment, without expectation. She spoke not of her own life, not of philosophy or therapy techniques, but of shared stories. Of a bird that returned to its nest, of a garden that bloomed against all odds, of mornings that promised a new beginning. One afternoon, Rosa sat beside Mrs. Whitman and held her hand, something no one had dared to do in years. "You remember your garden, don't you?" she whispered. And for the first time in months, Mrs. Whitman's eyes filled with recognition. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, and for that moment, the air felt alive, charged with a sense of possibility. Daniel, standing in the doorway, felt a lump form in his throat. He had never realized that healing could come from such simple, human connection, the kind that could not be bought or scheduled. Over weeks, Mrs. Whitman's transformation became undeniable. She began speaking in short sentences, then longer ones. She laughed softly, sometimes at nothing, sometimes at Rosa's gentle jokes. She wandered the mansion with Rosa by her side, her steps slow but steady, her grip on life strengthening with each passing day. And in this quiet, unassuming miracle, Daniel found a lesson that wealth had never taught him. He saw that the truest power was not in money or influence, but in compassion, patience, and the willingness to see someone fully, even when they seemed lost. There were setbacks, of course. Days when Mrs. Whitman would relapse into silence, when her mind would slip and she would call Daniel by the wrong name, or cry without reason. On those days, Daniel wanted to retreat, to leave the pain to someone else. But Rosa never did. She would sit beside his mother, hold her hand, hum her song, and speak words of reassurance until the storm passed. Daniel began to imitate her, slowly learning the language of patience and presence, learning that sometimes, the greatest act of love was simply to be there. Months turned into a year, and Mrs. Whitman's condition stabilized in ways no one had imagined. She still had fragile moments, but her eyes shone with life again. The mansion, once cold and sterile, became a home once more. There were flowers on the windowsills, fresh linens on the beds, and laughter that rang softly through the corridors. Daniel realized that Rosa had not only healed his mother, but she had healed him as well. She had taught him that even a life filled with material abundance could feel empty without emotional connection, and that the smallest acts of kindness could produce the most profound miracles. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, Daniel found himself sitting beside his mother and Rosa in the living room. Mrs. Whitman smiled at him, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "I feel like I'm home again," she said, her voice soft but steady. Rosa squeezed her hand, her own eyes glimmering with quiet pride. Daniel realized that he had witnessed something extraordinary, the transformation of a life through simple, persistent kindness. He thought about how often society overlooks the quiet heroes, the cleaners, the caregivers, the people who work without recognition or applause. Rosa was one of them, a woman who never sought fame or wealth, but who possessed a power greater than any fortune, the ability to touch hearts and restore hope. Daniel knew he could never repay her fully, yet he also understood that the greatest tribute he could offer was to carry her lesson into every part of his life. From that day forward, Daniel approached his world differently. He met employees with patience, listened to friends with empathy, and treated every encounter as an opportunity to practice the quiet, transformative power of kindness. He established foundations, funded programs, and used his influence not just to accumulate wealth, but to enrich lives in ways that mattered. Yet no matter how far his impact reached, he never forgot the lesson learned in that quiet mansion, beside a mother who had grown worse every day, and a cleaning lady who had done the impossible. The story of Daniel, his mother, and Rosa reminds us that miracles are not always grand or public. They often come in whispers, in subtle gestures, in the unwavering presence of someone who refuses to give up on you. Sometimes, the most profound change in life is sparked not by money, power, or fame, but by patience, compassion, and genuine human connection. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this: never underestimate the impact you can have on someone's life simply by showing up, listening, and caring. We all have the power to be a Rosa in someone's life, to bring light to a darkness that no money can illuminate. In doing so, we don't just change the world around us. We transform ourselves, discovering strength, empathy, and love we never knew we possessed. So, the next time you see someone struggling, don't turn away. Offer your time, your attention, your kindness. You might just do the impossible, and in the process, discover that your own heart can grow bigger than you ever imagined. Daniel never forgot that lesson, and neither should we. In the end, it is not wealth or power that defines a life well lived, but the love we give, the hope we inspire, and the courage to act when it matters most. Rosa's quiet heroism reminds us that true greatness is measured not by what we take from the world, but by what we give to it, and sometimes, that gift can change a life forever. So remember, every small act of kindness has the potential to create miracles. Be patient, be present, and be courageous in caring for others. Because when you do, you might just witness the impossible, and your life, like Daniel's, will be richer than any treasure the world could offer.